Hello everyone and welcome to the Ghost of the Deep Ultimatum guide and review and thoughts and explorer mode and everything video. First, let's start with the changes to Ultimatum mode. There are none. There's no there's a couple of changes which I think are actually great changes. The first is that while the opening encounter is now timed on Ultimatum mode, you now only need to do 3 cycles of it instead of 4, which was one of my biggest gripes about this dungeon, if not my biggest. Next, there is now a bonus loot drop after the underwater traversal section, which was a much bigger gripe with many other players. It's not the outright removal of the section or like a portal transferring you to the end of the section or anything like that, but it is certainly better than nothing. Next, in both main encounters, the only change is that the shield component of the boss's health is no longer a huge factor at all. You can use Arbalest to rip it off, and in the case of Ekthar, provide a short window of disruption break for any glaive stuff you might be doing, but it no longer feels like a necessity. Otherwise, there are no mechanical additions or changes to either encounter. I thought this was totally fine. Ghost of the Deep is already a pretty tightly tuned dungeon experience, and I wasn't really expecting a lot here. I don't think Bungie needed to add anything to these encounters at all, and I don't think adding anything would have really benefited them in any way whatsoever. Which brings us to loadouts. What should you be using to deal with these bosses? Ekthar actually has a few methods that work pretty well, although I do think one strat might reign supreme over the others. The first strat, believe it or not, is glaive related, using Winterbite and the couple of glaive perks in the artifact. You will want a Titan with the Banner of War aspect to help out with your survivability, although I'm sure a Well of Radiance could also help out, or a Song of Flame Warlock. No Bell from the artifact gives your glaive more damage when you block, so be sure to pepper in some blocks every now and then, as this buff only lasts about 5 seconds. Otherwise, to get in some more consistent glaive hits, hold down block and then mash on the melee button. We also had someone use Arbalest to provide disruption break on the boss for a bit of extra damage at the start. This can get a 2-phase, as long as people don't die and everything goes off without too many problems. That being said, Bolt Charge is simply way too good, and I think this is what many teams will likely opt for. Lord of Wolves did get fixed, but it is still doing obscene amounts of damage when hip-fired. When combined with Bolt Charge, you can do 70, maybe even 80% of the boss's health in one cycle on Ultimatum mode. Not only that, I was able to get another super in the middle of a damage phase while doing this strategy. We were also not even using Well of Radiance here. We were using Song of Flame with a tractor cannon on the Warlock as they pumped out shotgun shots and snapped their fingers a bunch. The third person can be whoever. Just put a Lord of Wolves in their hands and hip fire. I didn't try Legend of Acreus at all, but I'm guessing it works the same way as it did when this dungeon was originally relevant. I have some friends who used it and they were able to get a 2-phase pretty much no problem. I didn't use Thunderlord either, but I am actively watching people as I'm writing this video doing a 2 Thunderlord, 1 Divinity strat, also with Storm's Keep Titan and a Well of Radiance, and they were able to 2-phase as well, although it is a little bit closer. The point is, you can 2-phase this boss with many different options, but Lord of Wolves with Storm's Keep was crushing for us, and I think that's a very safe bet for many teams out there. Give it a try, hip fire. Don't aim down sights, hip fire. In terms of the rest of the fight, it's pretty manageable, but moths are going to be your biggest problem, in addition to any enemies with the Zealous Bane. Zealous is kind of like volatile, but for the enemies, and there are so many enemies that this will spread rapidly, and it will become a problem. So do your best to isolate out those Zealous Bane enemies. As for the moths, be vigilant, bring arc resist, and be ready to die to them anyway, even when holding up a glaive block. If you are doing the glaive stuff, the Banner of War aspect will do a lot of heavy lifting here. If you're an Arc Titan, just sit behind your barricade with Storm's Keep and spam some machine gun shots, and then you got your Lord of Wolves for boss DPS. Hunters have their pick of the litter here, but you can't go wrong with an Arc Hunter melee setup, just chaining big hits on everything, or some kind of prismatic variant. It's really up to you. Before we continue, the collectibles. Yeah, let me show you those real quick. The first one is in the room with the new loot chest after the underwater section. It's off on this, like, pillar thing off to the side here. And the other one is in the big Shrieker / wizard room right before you get to the final boss. Just head off to the right as soon as you enter this big room, and it's just kind of chilling on the floor here. Samuma can be treated as she was treated the first time around. Long-range weaponry. Moths will continue to be a problem, so be sure to shoot them down, especially after every time she teleports after locking in a rune. She summons like 7 of them, so be careful. And honestly, getting deep sight here wasn't the easiest feat either. Getting stuck in the animation for the actual grabbing of deep sight can prove fatal if the boss is looking at you, so coordinate with your team to get someone who is not actively being shot at to go grab the buff instead. And remember, it applies to everybody. The orange bar knights are also a considerable threat on ultimatum mode, so be careful around the start of a new damage phase. Prioritize the orange bar knights first. While I do think advanced teams will be able to save a lot of time by splitting up to grab all of the runes in all the different caves that you need to trigger the damage phase, it's not a terrible idea to stick together either, especially if you're going for a gold completion. A death just takes a lot of time to recover from, and if you're going for those gold completions, which means only 1 death is allowed, then that might be a big deal, as this fight can still be kind of long. In terms of loadouts, you're not going to believe this, but Queenbreaker, again, is the strat, combined with a Storm's Keep Titan and Particle Reconstruction in the artifact. And all the other Bolt Charge things in the artifact as well. Bolt Charge continues to be ridiculous here. Divinity is not 100% necessary, but in instances where the boss moves to an annoying spot that makes her uncrittable, maybe you're in the middle and she does some weird kind of floating above your heads kind of situation like what happened to us, it's going to show its value. She's also not the easiest target to hit constant crits on. That being said, this was an easy 2-phase for us on Ultimatum mode. Well of Radiance, also really nice here, as you would expect. And again, you do not need to worry about ripping her shield off with Arbalest or anything like that. It is not the same problem as it used to be, so just proceed as normal. In terms of loot, I will do a quick review, but I did a full video on this topic. If you want to check it out, I will link it at the end of this video. Cold Comfort is back, and you can get Envious Arsenal and Bait and Switch. That is the role to get. It is not a replacement for what Hezen Vengeance can do from Vault of Glass, but it's still a nice option to have in the vault if the time ever comes and you don't have a Hezen Vengeance. No Survivors, the SMG, I'm hunting for Heal Clip and Incandescent. I am now a believer in that perk setup, and I want one to mess around with for whenever SMGs come back into the limelight. New Pacific Epitaph didn't have anything I was super interested in, but Demo is always a reliable choice in the first column combined with your choice in the second. And Greasy Luck is a glaive that I think most people are not going to care too much about, but people were looking for Incandescent last time. I am more of a glaive perk on the glaive kind of guy, so like close to melee and replenishing Aegis and melee momentum, things like that. Now, when it comes to Explorer mode, I initially saw some not so good feedback about how Bungie handled it this time around. So I ran a full dungeon by myself. And I would have to disagree with that not so good feedback that I saw. I think this place is pretty adequately explained. I think the first encounter is probably the best explained in the dungeon. Everything is very clearly stated. There's not as much guidance in the underwater sections, but a lot of that section is just like go forward or go down. So maybe a couple of extra waypoints would be okay here. The second encounter I thought was also fine, but could maybe use some kind of a tooltip on the pool that you stand in to bring down Ekthar's shield, just as like a thing to confirm what's happening, and then maybe a waypoint marker to the deep sight thing when it first spawns in, because it can get pretty easy to feel trapped just constantly killing ads if you don't know that something happened behind you. The final encounter suffers from the trying to read tooltips while everything is shooting at you problem that I outlined in the dedicated Explorer mode video. The information is really solid in the tooltips, and it gives enough information to let the player, make some plays. But reading it in a timely manner while dodging everything and jumping up and down and strafing, even if you're not in immediate danger of dying, it's just a little awkward. I really hope Bungie is able to put all of the changes that they made in this version of the dungeon into the base and master versions of the dungeon. These were literally the main problems that people had with the dungeon. They are pretty much all fixed, which to me makes Ghost of the Deep an already great dungeon in my eyes into an excellent one. Bungie also recently changed the launch pattern for the dungeons after some community feedback. Instead of having to wait 3 weeks, it is now only 2 weeks, which is why Ghost of the Deep is live now. I was going to make a video on this topic with my feedback as well, but Bungie course-corrected quickly enough that I didn't even really have time to write a whole thing. They made some good moves with regards to the feedback that people were giving them, which was essentially like, bro, put out the dungeons faster, like, what are you doing? I just wish that we didn't have to resort to telling Bungie that their idea was not good, and they should have just did the thing that we were hoping that they were going to do. But at least they are willing to fix it after the fact, you know? So it's not all the time, but still. Anyway, that is your Ghosts of the Deep everything video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.